Hello dear students, today in this video let us learn the remaining part of social processes, that is conflict, accommodation and assimilation. Let us see the brief outline what we are supposed to discuss today. Meaning and concept of conflict, nature and characteristics of conflict, forms or types of conflict and their educational implications, meaning and concept of accommodation, the nature and characteristics of accommodation, the educational implications, and the same way meaning and concept of assimilation, nature and characteristics of assimilation and the educational implications. So let us learn what is conflict then. Now conflict, it is an ever-present process in the human relations. It is one of the form of struggle between individuals or groups, and it takes place whenever a person or group they seek to gain a reward not by suppressing the other competitors but by preventing them from effectively competing. We can say that in conflict an individual or a group tries to protect their own ideas, tries to protect the group from the other competitors by taking a stronghold. And Horton and Hunt have defined in this way that conflict may be defined as a process of seeking to monopolize the reward by eliminating or weakening the competitors. A.W. Green, that conflict is a deliberate attempt to oppose, resist or coerce the will of another or others. So we can see that conflict, it is a stand that an individual or a group can take up by for themselves or for the group, so that other group or others may not be able to weaken or destroy the ideas or the stand that they have been taking. So what are the nature and characteristics of a conflict then? We can say that conflict, it is universal, it is present everywhere in almost all the societies, and some differences might take place that in societies, few of the societies, it may be very acute and very vigorous as well. But in some other societies, we also can say that the conflict is very, very mild. Conflict, it is a conscious action. It can never take place in an unconscious level or unconscious state of the mind, because whenever we are involved in conflict, we are very much aware what we want and what we are supposed to do. So that is why we say that it is a conscious action. It is personal. When competition is personalized, it leads to conflict. It is not continuous but intermittent. So conflict can never take place continuously. We cannot live continuously being in conflict, so but it takes place occasionally. So no society can sustain itself in a state of the continuous conflict. It is impossible indeed. And conflict, it defines the issues, it defines issues about which individuals differ a lot, or about issues about the group which we demand, or maybe like we differ from the existing one, and that is why we can say that it defines the issues. Conflict, it is conditioned by the culture in the sense that it is affected by the nature of the group and its particular culture. The objects of conflict may be property, for few it may be for the power and the status, freedom of action and the thought, or any other which are highly desired value. Conflicts and norms is another characteristics that not only culture modifies conflict and its forms, but also controls and governs it. Conflict, it may be personal or impersonal. We may observe the conflict between two individuals, families, sometimes among the races, nations, and a group of nations. So it is present both in personal or impersonal level. Now there are certain ways of the resolving conflict. It can be resolved in two ways, that is accommodation and assimilation. The frustration and insecurity, it is the main reason which promote the conflict. Certain forms of war or types of the war, and these types of the war that I have presented here, it is according to George Simmel: war, feud, litigation, conflict, and impersonal ideas. Now, besides the ways or forms of conflict mentioned by George Simmel, there are other forms. It may be present or available in the form of corporate and personal conflict, latent and overt conflict, class conflict, racial conflict. It may be in the form of caste conflict, group conflict, and the international conflict. These are also the other types or the other forms of the conflict. Now let us learn about the forms or the types of the conflict that has been mentioned by the George Simmel. The first one is war. So according to George Simmel, war represents a deep-seated antagonistic impulse in the man, and to bring out this impulse into some action, definite objective or few definite objective it is needed, and the objective may be the desire to gain the material interest, or it may be because it may be to keep the interest of the nations or the races, and many more may take place. Feud or factional strife. Feud, we call that it is an intra-group conflict. It is within or within the group itself, and it may arise because of some injustice alleged to have been done by one group to the another. Litigation, it is a judicial struggle by an individual or group to protect right to possessions, and it is more objective in nature, the rights that one should have. Conflict of impersonal ideas, and we can say that this conflict carried on by the individuals not for themselves but it is for an ideals, and in such a conflict each party attempt to justify truthfulness of its own ideals. Now, what are the educational implications of the conflict then? We said the conflict, it is a fundamental social trait. According to sociologists, conflict and cooperation are phases of the social interaction. A situation of conflict, it is an integral part of the society. It must exist. And through conflict and struggles, a society overcomes its problems, and society can sign well and stand strong. They can show off their power. A limited amount of internal conflict may indirectly contribute to the group stability. So we can see that there are the positive impact of the conflict. Within the group, an occasional conflict may keep its leadership alert and its policies up to date. External conflict brings about the social unity and oneness among the members, and personal conflict also have the advantages. It is through constant struggling only that individuals can rise to a higher level. One can always become the best version indeed, and it can be possible with the help of the personal conflict. The opposition of one individual by the other is the only way in which the continued relationship can be made personally tolerable. The verbal conflict of the friends sometimes clear the air and permit them to accept the relationship once again, and that is why we can say that through conflict the students community can realize their own ideals of good. It always brings the unity and oneness among the members. So we can say that to conflict or to stand up for conflict for the group, for oneself, one should be very much alert what exactly one needs and what exactly one is standing for. One is trying to protect, it may be in possession, it may be for the statements, it may be for the interests of the group, and so on. So to raise the conflict or to stand for the group, it is not that easy, and that is why one should be very much competent and confident. Now let us come to the another form of the social interaction that we have in the society, and that is accommodation. Accommodation, it is one of the principal types of the social processes, and it is through this process the social order arises. Park and Burgess have mentioned that human social organization is fundamentally the result of an accommodation of conflicting the elements. And throughout life, man has to face a number of conflicting situations, and it cannot continue. Conflict cannot continue for so long, and that is why individuals or groups, we are supposed to come towards a certain adjustment or compromise, we can say, and such adjustment that meant us continuously to pull on with other people and situations can be called as what? Accommodation. So we can say in this way that it is a process of getting along in spite of the differences that we have, and it is the way of inventing the social arrangement which help people to work together whether they like it or not, because it has been already mentioned that it in spite of the differences. Now Meg Iverhave says that the term accommodation refers particularly to the process in which man attains a sense of harmony with the environment. It may be after the conflict or after the differences that we had. Lemberg is of the opinion that the word accommodation has been used to designate the adjustment which people in group make to relieve that fatigue and tension of competition and the conflict. So accommodation, it is a very good process of the social organization which unite the people together by adjustment. What are the characteristics of accommodation then? We can say that accommodation, it is the natural result of the conflict. Since conflict cannot continue or take place continuously, so one should always make room or space for the accommodation. Accommodation, it may be a conscious or sometimes it may be an unconscious activity also. So men's adjustment with the social environment is mostly unconscious. We are inclined towards coming together in spite of the differences, and it becomes conscious when the conflicting individuals and groups make a deliberate united, and an open attempt to stop fighting and start working together, while after knowing that it is the benefit, it will be better to come together for adjustment. We said that accommodation, it is universal. Accommodation as a condition and as a process, it is both present everywhere, all over the world. Accommodation is continuous throughout life. We have to come to the process of constant accommodation, so it will just go on. The effect of accommodation may vary with the circumstances, so it may act to reduce the conflict between persons or groups as the initial steps towards the assimilation. Now, what are the educational implications of accommodation then? Without accommodation, social life could hardly go on. Accommodation is found in all societies and in all fields, and since conflict disturbs social integration, disrupts social order, and damages the social stability, in all societies, efforts are made to resolve them at the earliest. So, conflict cannot continue. We, as an individual living in the society, we are supposed to come together. Accommodation checks the conflict, and it helps persons and the groups to maintain the cooperation, that binding, that participation in the society. And in educational institutions, the individuals as well as the groups, the students, the teachers community, the staffs, they are obliged to accommodate among themselves. And in the family as well, the relationship among parents and the children are based in terms of the superordinance and the subordination. It is said to have reached a state of perfection when individuals accept the relative position, and in teaching learning process, accommodation enables the pupils to adjust themselves to changed condition, and it reduces tension and maintains the necessary security among themselves. So it is a very wise thing for every individual to have the process of the accommodation. Now let us see what is assimilation. Assimilation, it is also one of the type of the interaction, but unlike accommodation, it is more permanent indeed. It is just like the form of social adjustment, but more permanent than the accommodation. So when a group of the person living together for a certain length of time adopt the lifestyle and customs of another group of person living in close proximity, we can call it as what? Assimilation. So, in other words, when the process of elimination takes place, the people in two distinct groups, they just do not compromise, they just do not adjust with each other, they become almost indistinguishable. And in simple words, we can say it is a process of the mutual diffusion of the culture. When people come together, habits, customs, and the ways of living are fused together. So, we can call it as what? Assimilation. And according to Borgadas, assimilation, it is a social process whereby attitudes of many persons are united and thus develop into an united group. Ogburn and Nimkov, according to them, assimilation is the process whereby individuals or groups once dissimilar become similar and identified in the interests and the outlook. So it is a very good form of the social processes. Now let us come to the characteristics. Assimilation, it is not confined to single field only. It is generally applied to explain the fusion of two distinct cultural groups, and this process is by no means limited to any single field. It may be of any kind of the fusion. It is a slow and gradual process. It is not possible to assimilate or to have the fusion of so many things at a time. So it occurs only when there is relatively continuous and a direct contact, and it takes place. It cannot just happen all of a sudden. It is an unconscious process. It is also a what? Two-way process. Now, in the case of educational application, assimilation takes place naturally and quickly in primary groups such as family, friendship group, and education. We can say it is a significant factor for assimilation. Now, factors which favor assimilation, we can say they are tolerance, intimate social relationship, intermarriage, cultural similarity, education, and the equal social and economic opportunity. And therefore, in classroom, the teacher should motivate the students not to remain in isolation as a returns assimilation and to encourage the students to take part for equal participation. And students must be in continuous contact with each other. So we can say that we can promote the factors which favor the assimilation for the betterment of the group, for the better interest of the group. Thank you so much.